Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to another of our live streams here in the ToLiss Airbus A321. Today, we're going to take our Air 2000, which I'll talk about a bit later on during the flight, Airbus, from here in Barcelona, where we left it last time, except it was obviously painted up differently, but they very kindly gave it a quick lick of paint in the workshop, and we're going to take it now down to Gibraltar and see if we can get our 321 into the nice short runway down in Gibraltar. I'm not sure which approach we're going to use, which end yet, but we'll have a look as we go and see what the weather works for us, and we might fiddle with the weather if we so decide, depending on how demanding that sim is being. As always, when I start these things, I always say I am a real-world Airbus pilot, so hopefully this can help you with your home simulations and give you a bit of extra context, but it's not for any real-world use, just for our fun in explaining. So here we are, on our stand in our livery that makes it look pretty similar to a 757, just as our 2E1 did, mainly because I'm used to seeing these aircraft in that livery on those aircraft. If we just jump inside, I'm just going to take off air traffic for now. It's just on Unicom. But as ever, please do let me know how the audio is working for you guys. It's still a work in progress, fiddling with the software we're using to stream. So just jumping into the chat very quickly, thanks very much for coming. I know it's a very lovely Sunday, so I will forgive anybody, of course, for having something better to do if you wanted to go and enjoy the sunshine. But thanks for coming along, Swappy. Great to see you. Richard V as well. So two long-time regulars and big contributors. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Swappy, and I hope you guys are as well. Hi, Richard and Swappy. Martin as well, thanks for coming along, Martin, and Mazin, classics, all regular viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great to see you here. So this time we're not going to start from our cold and dark setup. We're going to be a little bit more ready to go, so I don't have to put you through that once more. So let's get this going. We're here on our stand. Passengers are already on, and big problem with Gibraltar, as you guys know, and as my thumbnail, which I hope wasn't too clickbaity, but our thumbnail gives away that the runway there is very short. It's not normal to see 321s in there. They may have been operated in the past. I'm not too sure, actually. So if anyone has been to Gibraltar in a 321, do let me know, and we'll be able to prove that it's actually quite easy. But I'm expecting it to be quite rare, and here's the reason why. I've run a few numbers to try and fit in a 321 into Gibraltar. And when you run your performance figures in modern airliners, there's nearly always going to be a factor you add on to the distance. So you work out how long it's going to take you to land, and then you have to have a safety factor, so a margin. And that margin takes into account the fact that the numbers we get from our performance manuals are derived from Airbus and their test pilots and so on. And we need to add a factor onto that to make sure that, if the wind's slightly different or the landing isn't quite in the right place, that we have some margin and we don't just reach the limits of that performance. As a result of that, the numbers I came up with were giving me something similar to this. So as you can see, I've loaded up the aircraft. 62 passengers are coming along in this 321, so a good reason to use a smaller aeroplane there alone. And they can't have any bags, so I'm afraid they're all going to have to go to Gibraltar with their hand luggage because they get their own weight and then up to 100 kilos each, and that's it. So yes, it's going to be a bit of a light load, and that gives us a zero fuel weight that we can manage of 54 tons. Fuel-wise, we've got 7 tons on board. So you can see our route today. It's actually one of the easier routes. As usual, I'm hoping you can put in !flight plan into the chat and you'll get the Discord. Sorry, not Discord, the flight plan from the bot. I'm sorry that there's slow mode on the chat. I wouldn't normally have that. We just had a few issues a couple of streams ago, so for now it's just there to just try and keep things under control in case something like that happens again, but hopefully we'll be able to remove that pretty soon. So here's our route as ever. I'll show you by zooming in, going to plan on our EFIS control. Here's our departure from Barcelona, flight plan, and then we can scroll through, take off, make a little bit of a left turn, and then out to Lotos. So we're using a Lotos departure. Then if we zoom out and scroll through, we'll see that it's pretty much a straight line. It's one single airway. It's really quite good. And that takes us all the way down to Pimos, which is the start of the arrival. At the moment, I've got 27 loaded into Gibraltar. It seems that you guys aren't getting the flight plan. Let me just check what's going on there. It should eventually come back for you. Let me just have a quick check on that. I do apologise. I think something like this happened last time as well. So it should should load up for you. Let me just check it's all enabled. It is. Frustrating. Sorry, guys. It may take a little bit of time to work itself out. It did last time, I remember, but it did eventually get going. Same for the Discord. If it doesn't work, I'll just read it out to you anyway. So here we go then. So that's essentially our route. If we look on page 2, we can see it. It's quite good. Barcelona 25 right, Lotos, upper Mike 985 to Pimos, and then direct to Gibraltar. But it wouldn't be direct. We would obviously do some sort of arrival into Gibraltar. Right. Excellent. So that's the flight plan. We've done our diff strip setup. So flight plan's loaded. Secondary is just a copy. RadNavs is an RNAV departure. Init B is time to go to there. So let's get that up and running. So zero fuel weight, as we said, 54 tons because we have to be nice and light for this with a CG 28.6. Block fuel, 7 tons. Oh, we got a new subscriber. Thank you very much for subscribing to Rodrigo Mendoza. That's very kind of you. I hope you enjoy it. 7 tons block fuel gives us an extra 1.8 at the moment. We're using Malaga as the alternate LEMG, which is obviously just up the road from Gibraltar. So that's the logical place to go. And I think there's quite a good transport link between the two in case you can't get into Gibraltar for any number of reasons. I'm going to take off from 25 left here in Barcelona. I'm hoping there's no air traffic control at the moment, so that's my plan. So with active flight plan and using config 1, we're going to have no shift, flaps to 1, flexible temperature 46, nice long runway, V1 139, VR 139. So these are low speeds, thanks to that ridiculously lightweight, and 142. And there we go. Now the noise abatement I've left as standard. So this comes up occasionally in chats and questions I get. So I thought I'd show you what Barcelona is, and to do that, I'm going to bring it up on the full-size screen. So this is not the most exciting topic for you guys, but of interest. Barcelona has a load of airport briefing pages. There are tons. But if you find this one on departure continued, page 6, and you can see here, runway 25 left, initial turn on the SID will begin latest upon reaching 500 feet. Now, a lot of airlines will have a rule about turning below 500 feet above the runway on departure. So 500 is quite common to be a sort of standard first point to turn. So yeah, we can turn at 500 feet. This is, I don't know what Air 2000's SOPs were, but let's say that they allowed it. There's another note here that all aircraft which cannot comply with the previous instructions, so that's talking up here about following the SID normal trajectory until 6,000 feet and then 3,500 in ascent, moving away, blah, blah, blah. So lots of detail. But basically, we've got to follow that SID. And if we can't follow it properly and to within some decent accuracy, we've got to adopt ICAO NADP 1. So for us today, luckily, we can. We're just going to fly that RNAV SID. We can make our turn at 500 feet as well. But it's an interesting one where they have it written down ready, but as we're going to fly the SID, we don't have to bother with it. So it can be a bit confusing like that. Aircraft that might not be able to follow this guidance, it could be a ridiculously heavy airplane, a special cargo sort of airplane. It could just be performance restrictions on that day. Maybe you're having to do a flight with the wheels stuck down, something like that. That means your performance numbers won't work. All sorts of reasons. So there you go. So that's what ends up there. Just to show you where we are on the airport, it's where we left our plane last time, stand 258, and I'm going to taxi out to the south. So we'll go probably Echo 2, Echo 1, Kilo 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then full length here from Barcelona. Right, just a quick check in the chat in case I've missed anything. I'm sorry that the bot hasn't worked for you guys. That's frustrating. And let me just check that I had the command set right, because we had this trouble last time. Flight plan. There's also exclamation mark Discord, should bring up the Discord thing link if that doesn't work, but yeah, we'll have to have another go later if it doesn't. Good, sounds like the audio is working. Adrian Burke, thank you for coming along. Morvale, yeah, a new joiner on the Discord. Thanks for joining us. And I believe Morvale is a VATSIM ATC, so you can soon tell me if I do anything wrong on here. Geordie, hello, thanks for joining us, Geordie. Glad you can make it to this one. And yeah, Swap, yes, very kind of you. Right. Frederick Goranson, hello, thank you for joining us. And I recognise another name, Captain Dutchy. Thanks for coming along. And Aviation Alex. Thank you very much. 800 subs. Yes, we passed 800 subs just, I think, just today. So that's really great. Thank you to everyone for your support and for coming along. Oh, there we go. Look, Streamlabs has decided to wake up. Maybe it just takes a bit of time for it to get going. Always a mystery to me, but there we go. Okay, so that's our performance loaded up, FMGC loaded. Time to get that APU up and running. Barcelona seems to have got significantly busier outside. A few other aircraft appearing around us. I don't know if that means ATC has arrived. So while that's starting, I'm convinced the real airplane doesn't need quite as long a gap between those two, but it could just be me being too impatient. So the departure we've gone for is the, if I can show you on here, it should be quite obvious, Lotus for Quebec. So not that one. We don't need the noise abatement anymore. Lotus, and I think it's right down at the bottom. No, that's wrong. It must be near the top then. See, this is what amazes me. There's 2 runways that they use in Barcelona, essentially, just the 2. And there are so many charts when you compare it to somewhere like Amsterdam, who's got a lot of runways, and they've managed to fit them all onto one chart. But here we go. Lotus for Quebec from 25 left. 250 knots below 100. That'll be absolutely fine. Little note 1. 25 left. Due to environmental issues and except for safety reasons, turning to the left will begin no later than 500. Do not overshoot that radial. So there we go. That's in there. Then that will get us down to DOTIS. So let's just check the coding matches up in here. So if I go flight plan, there we go. You can't really see it, but it goes 500 feet. We've got that point. 500 as an overfly. Then intercept 208 to DOTIS. 208 to DOTIS. There it is. DOTIS above 3,000 feet. What we reckon will be 4,900. That's fine. And it does say maximum 180 and then 210 there, but it looks like it's not expecting to exceed those. And we're going to be maximum, let's say we're maximum of, that's an interesting note actually. I think we'll be absolutely fine because we'll be, if we're 210 knots, we need to bank at 20 degrees, which I know the Airbus would do. It's only when it's very performance limited. I'll talk about that a bit later on if I remember. There's other reasons it might not go to the full bank angle, but it should be fine for this. And then out we go, pretty much straight out. And as you can imagine, southwest up to flight level 100. The initial clearance is, for the for Quebec, it doesn't say on here, but I think it's 6,000. Here we go, climb and maintain 6,000, so it does say. So no clearance to get. Let's just set 6,000 in here so we're ready. Put that over to the 1,000 markers. Okay, so it's all coming together. APU is available. We'll give the passengers some air. The fuel is on. We've got our 7 tons. Get those doors closed up. I really hope they include some more ground animations. I've been meaning to get the animation manager for the ToLiss. I know a lot of people have recommended it, so hopefully that can come in the future because I think that just had a little nice touch. Okay, APU is available. Let's remove the ground power. That big clunk is quite common. It's just caused by the AC phases. Ground power is AC, as is the APU generator. And my understanding is that they go out of sync. They're not perfectly in sync, and then you get that clunk as things switch off and on. External power off. In some aircraft, not Airbus, or not short-haul Airbus that I know of, it can actually sync them up, so you don't get that at all. And there we go. And still nice and quiet around us. So yeah, this livery is very indulgent of me. I'm just choosing a series of liveries that I like. So I will soon be definitely opening up the livery suggestions to you guys, and we'll have a bit more popular liveries perhaps. But this is one I remember from the past. Okay, so that's all coming together. One last check that there's no ATC. No, absolutely not. And let's have a look at the weather. Make sure we have the latest information. So we're still working on QNH of 1018, which we've got set. Otherwise, quite a nice day. It's a light southerly breeze, but that means it's about 60 degrees off for runway 25, so that's fine. Pilot Migs, thanks for coming along. Alipay2, thank you for coming along. That's very kind of you. Minty Aviation, hi, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you can enjoy this stream and many more to come. Okay. Let's get going. Ian Morris, thanks for coming along as well. Excellent. Lots of regulars. Very kind of you all to join us. So I think we're pretty much ready to get pushed back. What I am going to do is just before I embarrass myself, just check that we have actually got the right fuel on board. So we needed 6.3 and I put on 7 tons. Now, weight is a big problem if we're going here, as you saw with my light passenger load. And as a result of that passenger load, I'm going to put on the econ flow because there's just no passengers on board. So that just ever so slightly reduces the fuel burn. It's really, really limited difference, but it is there. It is a procedure. So we'll just do that. Econ flow just makes the pack run a little less air, which means that there's less air being drawn out of the engine, so they can burn a little less fuel because they've got more air to use for thrust. So 6.3, but the problem is this flight plan, and you've got to take this into account when you look at your flight plans, it has direct and then to Gibraltar. So I know that Plymouth is the start of the arrival and then there's the approach, but I want to try maybe runway 09. We'll see when we get there. But if I wanted to do that, it's all the way around to the other side of the island, so it's more track miles. So I need to take that into account when my fuel planning. Also, there's a higher chance of a second attempt into Gibraltar, obviously, with the short runway. So I've added on, we've gone up to 7 tons, and that also has 700 contingency fuel. So I think that's quite a good place to be. That pretty much gives us about a ton and a bit extra. So I think with that, we'll be able to fit in and do it. But we can't obviously just put on 10 tons of fuel extra because then we won't fit. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And there are days out there where the weather's really bad, the runways are short or wet or contaminated with snow and things like that. And you're trying to balance the fuel and the passengers and their weights, and it can be quite tricky. But fortunately for us today, I can just remove all the passengers. So there we go. Okay, so we're going to push back, and I'm going to want to face us to the east. So our call sign is Jetset, that AMM, but we're going to use Jetset, which is what I've filed into VATSIM. Jetset 217, pushing back from gate 258 to face east. Okay, he says when he hasn't done, better push back as usual. So it's going to be somewhere like this. We'll block that roadway, which is always fun.
Ground to cockpit, can acknowledge. Coming through the menu when you are ready. Ground to cockpit, Tau is driving up.
Starting the pushback, here we go. Simon Taylor, thanks for joining us. Watching from the back garden, excellent. I'm glad you're enjoying the sunshine. It's occurred to me that this was probably not the most sociable time for people, but I'm glad you've been able to find a way to join in. Thanks for that. Flight 24, thanks for coming along. They don't make liveries like they used to. Absolutely. I see this and instantly think of holidays, which is what I'll talk about as we go. This great tapestry. It's called the tapestry livery, and you can see why, all these different parts. It's like it's been sliced out of a larger picture. Very sort of 90s bright coloured charter airline. You'll also notice we got the CFM engines today, so we'll chat about that as we go along as well. So pushback's connecting. Let's get our checklist up and running. So checklist, and we're going to go through to
all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
Before starts, and I have to actually turn it on, don't I? Open checklist. There we go. Done. We've done a brief, done ATC, SID, initial altitude, transponder. That's a good one. So let's get that set to XPDR. Thrust levers to idle. Get that beacon on. Check that everything's closed. So for the windows, you look for this little red disc to show that that's popped up and locked in position. The windows can actually be opened in flight up to a certain speed limit, but you'll find that once you're pressurized, that's not possible. But there are a few occasions where that might be used. Contact ATC, start the pushback. So let's get going. I think.
Start connected and bypass being inserted. Release parking brake.
Okay. Brakes released. Off we go.
Pushback, and you may start engines.
So we got that nose stream disconnect. That's a message you would always check for. Most airlines will have that somewhere in the checklist. It's really important because if it's not there and you start pushing, it could mean that when the hydraulics come online, the nose wheel will try and go straight, at which point it will rip itself or damage the tug or do all sorts of expensive damage to the airplane. So really important. And that's done by the ground crew. They put a little pin. I don't know if you can see it here. A little pin just down into this little box here. And that way it stops it from being able to turn with the hydraulics, just a disconnect valve. Right, let's get going. So APU master's on, get the clock running. And we're going to go ignition starts, start engine 2. You give it a second. It usually takes a second for that pressure to come online. Start 2. What happens is when you turn that to ignition, the air that was going into those air conditioning packs automatically gets diverted into the starter valves. And it will do that for a little while. And then if you don't start the engine, the Airbus is quite clever and it will just put that air back into the air conditioning packs until you then put the master on. So it's, yeah, really, really neat setup. Very easy for us as pilots sometimes to, we're looked after, put it that way. Should have started the timer. There we go. That's something I have missed. Officer Miles Logan, thanks for joining us. A name I haven't seen before, I don't think, in the live chat, so that's great to see you. Marzin's asking, from where can we get landing performance limitations, required runway length versus landing weight? Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not something I've been able to find yet. So I'm on the search. So if anyone does know, please put it into the chat. There's ones available for 320s and 319s because they've been out longer, but the 321, it seems slightly rarer. So I'm going to keep searching, and then that'll go into the Discord, or I'll show it in a future video. Okay, there's the engine. Started, sitting at idle. Let's start engine 1. Slightly different noise today as well. I don't know if you guys can hear the ambient noise. I've turned it up a little bit today.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Okay, you check out the side because it's the only way to see that we're not moving. Yeah, we're not moving. Set the brake. Brake pressures are there.
Connecting tow. Stand by.
And now they disconnect. It's a big deal, the parking brake, when you're pushing back. It's really another expensive incident. If you accidentally set the brake, or if they try to push you with the parking brake set, you'll find a lot of damage to the aircraft very quickly, very quickly. So we are very careful with that. On the Airbus, there is a little light down here that will show them that the parking brake is or is not applied, and that is another backup. It's not the main use though, because the light can brake obviously, but it is a backup because it allows them to ask us again if they think we've not actually disconnected it. Okay, that's available. Much quicker to start these CFMs. That goes to norm. APU bleed off. APU off. We're obviously going to do both engines today.
Flow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the left. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
Okay, and there go our lovely pushback crew. Flight deck's gone very dark. Sorry about that. It seems to vary a little bit. I know it was a bit of an issue on the last flight, but here we go. Charts. And we've got our ground charts. So we're somewhere here. So we're just going to go forwards and join Echo 2. I don't think we'll see him from here. Oh, there we go. Excellent. There's the wave. So ground crew are clear. And let's bring up the after start checklist. Checklist after starts. AP lead, AP master, trim. There we go, of course. That's why we always do this. Save me embarrassing myself. It could be quite different. At light weights, the trim can be surprising. No, 29.4. Sorry, guys. I keep forgetting to change that to something different. So look at that. That's pretty much set there automatically. Okay, pushback crews disconnected. There they go. And we'll do these as we go. Excellent. Right, what's our taxi route? We're going to go forwards, Echo 2 to cross that middle center runway, which is runway 02. Jetset 217, Barcelona ground, taxiing to Echo 2 to hold short runway 02. Right, another look all around. This Dash 8 isn't going anywhere, which is good news for us. And there we go. Brakes released. Excellent. So, it seems like the CFM engines are letting us roll forwards. I think that's probably realistic at this weight. The plane will probably be running away from us, so maybe single engine would have been a better thing to do, because now I'm going to have to constantly use the brakes as we go along, because look at that. Still idle thrust. We are just off. So let's do our brake check. Yep, that works. Those are still down. And what we'll do is we'll do our flight controls to what we can, and then we'll try and do the rudder around the turn. Full left. Full right, neutral, full down, full up, neutral. I apologise if you can hear creaking. My joystick seems to have got creakier and creakier as time has gone on. Okay, we'll keep a good look out now. Clear to the left, clear to the right. I'm expecting to make a right turn. Have I got this right? Have I got this right? How am I going to get to Echo 2? Oops, excuse me. I think I'm going to have to go left and then up there, because that takes us... okay, let's take Juliet 6. Because otherwise we have to go up to the left. I see, yeah. So it looks like we'd have to take Juliet 6 and then go around the bottom through Lima Sierra. I think we can do that. There's no one around, so I won't bother broadcasting that to everybody. There we go. We can do our full right rudder check now. We can cheat. So that's full right. You can see it not moving there. So in the real Airbus, if you went full right rudder whilst you were taxiing, it would only move the nose wheel a few degrees. I think it's something like 8 degrees. It's not very much. It's not designed for the taxiing. It's just to keep you on the center line, really. It's mainly there for takeoff and landing. Around we go. Yeah, great job on the livery. If you type in !livery, I've been very organised, I hope, today, and it should give you the link if you'd like to go and try this one for yourself, because it wasn't on the master repaint list that I was previously using, so I had to do a bit of a search for it. Fly 24, okay, no problem at all. Thanks very much for coming along, and enjoy your afternoon. And a very happy birthday to all involved. Marzin, from where can we get the landing performance? We've talked about that already. Matt Haynes, thanks for joining us. Very kind of you to come along. Adrian Burke, I know the pushback seemed to go remarkably smoothly. That's very good to see. Pilot Peely, thanks for joining us. I'm very good. I hope you're well as well. Great to see you here. Okay, now we're going to take Kilo 7. Yes, I'm going to take left here, join Kilo 7, and go through the undershoot of that runway. I'll be curious to see if there's a stop bar there. Yes, there is. So let's bring it all the way around. I can do full left rudder. So that's that checked. So I can cheat there. And now, let's just bring it to a stop. Let's be careful with this, just in case this is VATSIM after all. That is astonishingly poor taxiing, but there we go. Looks all clear around. Jet set 217, crossing runway 02 at Kilo 7. Okay, brakes released. We've done that. And then we do the checklist. There we go. So let's get ourselves over here. Let's do what we did before. Strobe lights will go on so that they start flashing. I'm not going to bother with the landing lights for this one in particular because I can see it's daylight and we're going to point across the runway. What we will do though is we won't hang about, so let's get moving so we don't block it for too long. There goes a lovely 737 getting airborne. Right, let's get moving.
Approaching 02.
There's our RAS system. Talking with the authority it always does, which is great. Always makes you stop and think, is this what I thought I was doing? Engines are warm. That's 5 minutes on the warm-up. That's good. We'll definitely do a PAX on takeoff because we're going to climb so fast. So that's something else. When you're flying around at these weights, you have to sort of consider these things. So 6,000 feet is quite a high level off for a departure, quite normal. So there's no problem there. If that was a low level off, we would have a very short time from when we got off the ground to when we leveled off. So in that case, you might consider, let's leave the PAX on just to reduce our workload when we get in the air. Also, the PAX on saves a few kilos of fuel, but if it distracts you from something else, then it probably isn't worth it that day. Okay, we're over the runway. That can go off. So we've done our flight controls. The other pilot would do theirs. And now let's also just do our bits here. So weather radar to on, predicted wind shear to on. I'm not sure why there's 3 positions in the ToLiss. There's only 2 for predicted wind shear off and on, so it doesn't need to be flicked through the middle gate, but minor detail that. TCAS to TARA, max auto brake. Let's ding the cabin crew. Takeoff config. Now let's get ourselves, make sure we stay on that center line. Good, so we're nearly there, getting underway. And now I'm just going to check our PFD. We've got those speeds in, 139, 142, climb that blue at armed of 1 and flight director 2. 6,000 feet is in and ready on the QNH. Looking good. I'll go through the chat once we get in the air, so sorry if I've missed any queries or questions or thoughts. I will get that to you soon. Right. I like the noise. I think the ToLiss sound, hopefully you guys can hear it. I've turned up the ambient sounds a little bit. I quite like the CFM noise engine in the ToLiss. I know that I think they're going to make a sound mod, or is it F mod? So you guys will know more than that about that than I do. But I think they're going to introduce new sound effects for it as probably a paid expansion, is my understanding. But for now, I think the ToLiss ones are pretty good. Okay, so things to think about this departure. What's that first speed limit? Is we're going to be well below. It's a speed limit of 210 knots, so that's fine because unusually today we can be clean at 210. Also, I need to consider the fact that we're going to turn at 500 feet, so we'll be ready for that. Okay, entering the runway. Here in Barcelona is an interesting, it's a really interesting part of the airport. You've got all of these different lineup points, so there's actually 3. And this is an amazing job. This is the default Barcelona airport. But what you can find is you'll be taxiing here, and there's another airliner here, and the tail could come to here or here. And I believe this area has had an incident before where 2 airplanes, the wingtip and the tail, actually scraped along each other because they weren't up at the holding point properly. So it's quite a tight maneuvering area, so something to be very careful of. Often they give you a choice, so they might just say, yeah, line up and you can take Golf 2. Obviously, there's an aeroplane there, you wouldn't do it. So I think today we'll take Golf 2. Don't see the point in going all the way around. Right, what have I missed? What have I missed? Let's stop at the holding point, just have a bit of a thought gather, and then we can get underway. Stopping at holding points as well, talking about that, it's quite tricky to judge in the airplane. So there you go, I've now lost sight of that stop bar underneath me. If I roll forwards, you can't see it at all when you start to look out the side, and it's surprising how close you can get. Let's see if I can judge this. It's quite. Let's try there, and I'm hoping that no part of the airplane. And there you go. We are way back. It's amazing how much closer that you can be in real life, or in from your view before the nose will actually go over the line. So somewhere there. Let's try that. That could be too far. Might have pushed my luck. Nope. I think that's a little bit exaggerated, actually. I would say if I was sitting in an airplane and I saw the line there, that would be a good sign to stop. But very hard to judge. Right, so let's go through checklist, open checklist. Right, we've done ATC, weather radar, strobes, landing lights. We'll go on way into the runway, no smoking signs, and chronometer. And then we go into our takeoff procedure. Excellent. Jet set 217, lining up Barcelona 25 left and taking off to a southwesterly departure, 6,000 feet. Clear on the approach. Just check that is TR8. Oh yes, and what we need to do in the ToLiss specifically is just set that to on. Oh, just got a ding. What have I missed? Oh, that is someone talking about Ibiza. Okay, my mistake. I'm not used to the dings in that sim yet. So, strobes can go back on. Lights, landing lights on. Get those. Oh, I missed those lights earlier. That's terrible. There we go. Something I did miss. Get that through to takeoff. And now we can enter the runway and get going. So, what taxi we've done that one. Good stuff. 13-minute taxi, not too bad. So how much taxi fuel did we use? That's 200 kilos. That's pretty much standard. That's what most airlines will use as a sort of standard taxi fuel. If you're in a really busy airport, somewhere like Gatwick or Heathrow, maybe Paris, something like that, where you might have a longer taxi, you could probably think about increasing that.
25 left.
One last check of the approach, as the RAS tells us. You'll see it didn't stop us crossing the stop bar, but it does stop us actually entering that runway. So, as I said before, might not save you the paperwork, but it could save you from actually blocking a runway. Around we go. As I said, I'll get back into the chat just once we get into the air and on our way. So we get ready for a 500-foot left turn, otherwise climbing up to 6,000 feet. Get that nose round. Oh, could be a bit wide. Let's see. I think I've got to coax that a bit.
25 left.
And today we'll go for a rolling takeoff. So let's start the chrono. Half side stick down. Let's see if I can get 50%. So there we go. Nice with the CFMs. I can just put the little blue donuts onto 50. And now 2 clicks forward. Man, flex 46, SRS runway. Auto thrust is armed. Off we go. 80 to 100 knots. I can feel the airplane trying to turn to the left because of that wind from the south. And rotates. Releasing that rudder, letting the airplane weathercock into wind. Nav and positive climb. Gear up. And now I'll just bring up the flight directors for you. So there's our left turn. Now I think it should be a bit earlier than that. There we go. Come on, let's turn. Oh, they'll be very annoyed with us. And for once, we've got a really high pitch. This is a normal pitch for an Airbus takeoff. I always say the ToLiss speeds are too high, and as a result, the pitch is too low. But that was more realistic, right up at sort of 17 plus degrees. Okay, we're through that. So levers to climb, thrust, climb, climb, auto thrust. Now we're going to swing back round to the right. Don't need to do anything to the flaps now until we're above that green S. And you've got to look through the flight directors a little bit. You've just got to be ready for what's coming next because they can be a little sensitive. Sometimes they do a big fly left or fly right, which isn't really needed. How's our water looking? Yeah, I've got a Lewis script. I've changed the settings slightly. I'm hoping the water looks a bit nicer for our approach into Gibraltar. Okay, there's through the green S. So I'm going to put in the autopilot because I never show this properly. Autopilot 1. And now flaps to 0. And they both come in. The auto retract not used today. And here we go, because we went slightly through, so it's bringing us back round and so on, up to 6,000 feet. Flaps are at 0, so we'll disarm the spoilers, get rid of the landing lights, and these little lights, because we're going to go into cloud anyway here. Temperature 22. Okay, so we don't need the anti-ice. Now what I would do in real life, if I hadn't got further clearance, that is absolutely not what I would do. I would have gone to 2 dots and pulled for vertical speed. So vertical speed plus 500, and I need to check, because I've fiddled with it now, that we get out blue 6,000, which we have. Really important that if you accidentally get the VS wrong, check that you get the out blue back and it'll show you're going the right way. 500 probably a little too slow, but there we go. Plus 1,000. And then, yeah, you'd wait for air traffic to give you further climb. I can't see anything out there. Fantastic. This is where I think the X-Plane weather engine is really good as you come in and out of these clouds. I think it looks really nice. Okay, let's get ourselves up then to, we want to cruise today at 370. For once, we can go up nice and high. The airplane's so light. So, thrust climb, open climb, out blue 37. Let's put in standard. Flight level 370 is blue with the outs. And away we go. So thrust to set, flaps 0, speed brakes, backs, lights. Contact ATC. The next one is at 10,000 feet. And away we go, leaving a rather grey Barcelona behind, hoping for some nicer weather further south in Gibraltar for our little holiday. And yes, look, we got some reflections on the water. I'm very proud of that. A bit of tweaking needed there, getting up above the clouds. So we'll do our Flight 100 checks, and then I'll have a quick look into the chats, and we'll see what's come up so far. Right, that's good enough. Flight level 100. Landing lights are already off. Passengers can be released. It's nice and smooth. The econ flow will stay on. There we go. Nice and light in the flight deck now. Not sure what changed. Just seems to be the lighting engine. We can clear out the radnav. Not that we were using it. Secondary, as you can see there, it's pretty much the same, but let's just copy it over so it's ready in case we need it. Let's go to airports. And if anyone's following along, you'll see that our route just takes us sort of along this south coast. Great feature. Oh, not routes, maps. In the Avi tab. I mean, the Avi tab is just an absolute golden tool. I really like it. So we're going to fly down. We're going to cut over this part of the land, over some terrain here, and then Gibraltar will be down here. Little rock of Gibraltar. Excellent. And away we go. Okay. Right. Sorry, guys, for that delay. Thomas Mortimer, thanks for joining us. I've just bought the AVS plugin from FF, so I've been trying it out. It gives you a pop-up airport navigation for taxi and creates routes like the 78, A380 and A350. That's very interesting. Yeah, let us know what you think of it. I haven't heard of that one. That's new to me. There's always new parts to explain that I'm not aware of. So yeah, that could be useful. Believe it or not, there are some 321s that can have specific taxi displays on the navigation display. So when you go onto your onto videos and you'll see the 380 or 350 or other heavy aircraft, they can zoom in and they use this little range scale here and zoom all the way down, and then they can go even further until they got a map of the airport. Now it's really important for the 380 because it has such a ridiculously big wingspan. I think it's nearly 60 meters or 80 meters. I'm not sure. Somebody can correct me on that. Massive, absolutely massive. I know the tail plane, so the tail wings on the 380 produce as much lift force as the main wings on the 320. So it's a huge machine. So they need to know very carefully where they are, because if they turn down the wrong taxiway, and that could look like a normal taxiway, it could be big enough for a 777, but it might not fit them, and they could very quickly find that they've dented something, or worse, or even if they get it just wrong, they'll have to be pushed back out and can cause a lot of disruption. If you imagine someone taking a wrong turn on one of the high-speed exits at a busy airport like Paris, Amsterdam, Heathrow, you could cause huge delays to a lot of airplanes. So yeah, it's really important they get it right first time, and obviously primarily for the safety of just not hitting anything. So in the 321, it's rare to see, but it is certainly an option that you can scroll down on this on specific models. ToLiss seems to provide us with a relatively basic one. I've said before, this weather radar is really, I'm gonna say, borderline outdated. It's so it's not very well laid out in my opinion. I'm sure it's very functional, and once you have it set like this, it's fine, but it's just not as good as some of the others. In particular, the Neo, which has a really fantastic radar, and I hope they include that in the next in the Neo update if they do one. AliPay2 says maybe Top Cat would be an option. I'll have to have a look. I don't know what that is, so that's an interesting one. Thanks for that. For the performance figures, I'm assuming that's referring to. SwapES says that the utility for charts, yeah, it doesn't necessarily work with AviTab. SwapES asks, where is the rudder disconnect button? Great question. It is here. So that button there, but as you can see, that's just steering the tiller. So I thought I'd assigned it to a button, and I have yet to make that work. The ToLiss does have that option. And the reason it's there is so that your hand, you put your palm on this part, then your fingers go around. Let's see if I can get to it. Very naughty. Absolutely not what we should be doing while flying. Let's have the PFD ready. So your palm goes here, your fingertips go into these little grooves on each part of the tiller, and then you just move it left and right. And you never have to move it more than sort of, not even 90, I think it's something like 60 degrees. I'm not entirely sure. The numbers are written on the real one. And that's it. So you can do it with just your hand flat on it, and you don't have to remove it or anything like that. And that round bit on top is a big button. So with your palm, you press down on that, and when you do that, the rudders can move and they won't steer the aeroplane. Which is obviously incredibly useful, and that's how we do our rudder check 9 times out of 10 whilst we're taxiing along. You'll have that. Now, as I said, it's possible to go to full left rudder and full right rudder whilst taxiing, and the airplane will only steer a little bit, but it'll be more than you could use. You know, you can only do it for a short second, so it's not sensible. Yeah. Thomas Watermore, yeah, that sounds like that plugin would help. A bit like having a sat nav for the airport. There's the livery, yeah, Martin. Hope you enjoyed it. Arnie F, loves the plane. Thanks for joining us, Arnie. Thanks for coming along today. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. I'm a big fan of it as well. Here we go, roaring through the sky. It's basically, we're using the call sign Jetset. We're part of Air 2000. Air 2000 was a charter airline in the UK. Let me know. I need to be a bit louder here, by the way. But yes, basically the Air 2000 charter airline ran in the UK, and they eventually they started off in a red livery. They became this sort of new tapestry livery, and then they changed it to the First Choice livery, which you might recognise, and then they got merged into First Choice. So it became part of that, which eventually went on to become part of Thomson and TUI. So it would now be that sort of standard TUI livery, which we've used in previous flights. But yeah, I actually really like this one. It's one of my favourites. Like I say, really 90s with this nice long stripe. And I'm sure some of the 757s, they printed some paint on the wings with a similar pattern. It may just be that the model I have, because I have one of the plastic models from on board, it may be that just they added that to that but never bothered with the real aeroplanes. But I haven't found a picture. I was Googling around online to find one, but I couldn't. But yeah, I really like it. Really bright. And anyone who's flown on the UK charter airline in the 1990s will recognise that sort of bright colours, and I'm sure the cabin crew's uniform and so on featured it, and lots of striking patterns. So it just makes you think of going on holiday in my mind. So I'm, like I say, being very self-indulgent with liveries that I remember from my childhood. So I apologise, and we'll certainly mix it up and continue our livery tour, because there's so many good ones out there. I'm amazed at the work people do for these liveries. So there's plenty more to be enjoyed. Right, let's have a quick look through. Alpha, thanks for joining us. I haven't quite put the specs up yet. That's a good idea. I'll add that to the Discord for next time. But essentially, as some of my regular viewers will know, I'm using a laptop, so I've got an i7 6700 HQ and a GTX 1060 mobile graphics cards. So hello Alpha, thanks for joining us. Absolutely. Swappy says the PSS sound mod is the best. Okay, interesting. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm way behind on the text here. So Oscar, thanks for joining us, Oscar. Great to see other people joining in, especially newer names that I haven't seen before. Or apologies if you have been before and I've missed it. As you can see, I'm running quite behind on the chat. Richard V, there's a free sound expansion for the ToLiss 319 and 21, but I understand that a BSS sound pack for the 321 is coming. Okay, so let me know if anyone has the free sound packs. What do they think? Are they better than the traditional ones? I'm a big fan of the traditional or the default ToLiss ones, but I may be proved wrong. I haven't tried the others. Yeah, Oscar, I think probably did come along before actually, so I do apologise. Henrik K, sorry, I'm running behind again today. What jobs can I get for flight hours if I'm holding an ATPL and MEIR? Well, it depends what part of the world you're in. If you're talking about Europe and you have a full ATPL, then that obviously would be valid, assuming it's a normal EASA ATPL. You can become an airline captain with an ATPL. If it's a frozen ATPL, so you've got your CPL MEIR, which is your multi-engine annual instrument rating, and you've also done your ATPL exams, then you can become a co-pilot in an airline. But you obviously need to do your type rating. In terms of how many hours you need, or you want to build flight hours, then it's just the problem is the state of the industry at the moment. So sometimes airlines will take cadets with just the bare minimum hours, and they've just come out of flight school, and they'll let you go, and they'll put you into the airplanes, and they'll start paying you, and they'll give you your type rating, and that's great. And that's what's the dream is for so many of us. Sadly, when the industry's bad like this, it becomes a lot harder, because now with so many airlines making pilots redundant, there are plenty of pilots with flight hours who are also on the market looking for jobs. So if airlines don't have to pay to train you, then they'll take pilots who are already experienced, because obviously it's quicker and easier for them. But the market's cyclical. It's always going up and down. So when it starts going up again, there'll be a shortage. There nearly always is. And airlines are in a hurry to try and recruit people. And airlines like certainty, so they like to know where their pilots will come from. So even if they have to recruit, it's nice for them to have cadets coming through a system ready to come online at some point in the future, because it gives them a little bit of certainty. Because otherwise they might find that they need some pilots and they can't get hold of any because the market's just so short of pilots, which does happen occasionally. Emre Uzum, thank you for joining us. Hello. And the post office. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the first part of that name. I am Dimitri. Thanks for joining us from Vancouver again. Good to see you here. Thanks for coming along. And Q8 pilots. Wow, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. It's good to see Q8 pilots been providing a lot of great flight simulator content for many years, and is hugely active in the community. Thanks for coming along to see us. So yeah, another channel there for you guys to check out. Rodrigo, leaving the terrain on is a procedure or just normal preference? It's preference for me, actually. If I can't see any weather outside, I'm going to sit here and have some sort of view on the ND. If I turn it off and there's nothing, it's just sort of this black line, and I quite like it, mainly for situational awareness. Just gives me an idea. It could show up if I see red around, I'll know there's terrain around, things like that. But otherwise, yeah, just preference. Remember that this isn't using the radar. I can turn the radar off and you'll still have this. It's just a database. I know it swipes like it's scanning, but it isn't. It's just sat in there in a big memory file. So yeah, so that's typical. There's Alicante. There's Ibiza, where we've been to before on a previous flight. How are we doing on our climb? A few thousand feet to go, climbing nicely. She's doing well with the light loads. I think we're going to have a little bit of a cruise today, which is good, so we'll have time to talk about it. Simon Woodman, hello there. Great to watch your stream. Thank you for joining us, Simon. Good to see you again. On VATSIM, Zurich arrival told me to maintain flight level 190 and reduce to clean speed. Seemed a bit odd since 190 is pretty high. Is that realistic? Well, if I was flying into an airport and they told me to reduce to minimum clean at flight level 190, what it tells you is there's going to be delays. So they're trying to give you, if they slow you down, the airplane's more efficient. So the most efficient speed for me now, green dot speed, where I'll burn the least fuel whilst I wait to get my approach time and so on, is going to be, minimum clean would be around green dot for me here. So it's rare to be slowed down that early, but it's certainly possible, especially if there was a thunderstorm or a snowstorm or strong winds, anything like that, then yes, it does happen. If you're coming into London TMA, you might get told to slow down very early whilst they sequence you in with other airplanes, things like that. It should be to avoid holding. So you'd hope that if they slowed you down that much, you'd then not have to hold for too long. So it could be that they expect you to have to fly in circles twice in a hold. So to stop you doing that, they slow you down earlier to avoid it being an issue. Corrosive Moon, thanks for subscribing. Very kind of you. And I hope you enjoy the stream and many more to come. And there's plenty of tutorials and videos on my channel if you fancy any of those, if you're learning the Airbus. Oh, I need to close that before explaining disconnection from XPilot. And here we go. Mac outstart. Look at that, over 1,000 feet per minute for the last 1,000 feet. Very rare. My channel, we normally end up crawling up to the top. Mac and out cruise. There we go. Excellent. And straight away that thrust comes right back because we've got so much extra energy. Really nice. Nice to fly an airplane with extra power. All pilots will like the idea of having more power than this. Right. Let's do what this little flow says now. If you want to get hold of this procedure, it's on the Discord. So this can go to below. And Matteo's done a great job. He's been working on this. So full scan of all systems pages. Yeah. So what it means is we would get a message. I've said this before in my stream, so apologies to regular viewers. But we'd get a message warning us if there's anything starting to go wrong. And certainly we would get an ECAM if something has gone wrong. But what typically Airbus pilots will do is they'll have a scroll through here and have a look through to make sure there's nothing alarming starting to go wrong. You might see high temperatures. Could see hydraulics starting to go lower than you expect. As I said before, the green system is usually a bit too high and the yellow system a bit too low and so on at the moment. But then it evens out. Fuel, balanced. We burnt 1.6 plus 5 tons. That would be 6.6, 6.9, 7 tons of fuel. So if we add up the fuel we have now with the fuel we've burnt, that's 7 tons. So the maths works. So that means we can be pretty confident that nothing's pouring out of the wings right now. Otherwise, if we'd used more fuel, so if we did that sum and we came up with 10 tons, then we've used more fuel than we got left in the tanks, and there's a problem somewhere. And we've got to start doing some serious investigating to find out where there might be a leak. Likewise, if it's too little, there could be a sensor issue or something like that. You could have started with the wrong amount, all sorts of things. So yeah, worth checking. Also, as I've said before, we'd have a look at the temperature, but it's not modeled. APU, and you can just press the all, just click it each time. 20 degrees in the cabin. Quite common for the cabin crew. They tend to like it slightly cooler in the cabin, so that they're obviously working quite hard. So if you let it get more than sort of 23 degrees, you'll soon get a complaint or a request to turn it down. It also, I think, in the motion, I think most people respond better to motion in a slightly cooler environment. If it's too hot, people will start to feel a bit ill quite easily. So there we go. We've done our scan. Next is our descent prep. Fantastic. And off we go, heading over the coast. So yeah, a little bit over the sea, and then in we go. And Geordie's saying that yes, they're subscribed to Q8. Yeah, big contributors to the community. Captain Binny, thank you for joining us. I remember my first flight on an Air 2000 757 in the red and gold. Yes, exactly. So that was how they started out. So I haven't seen a red and gold livery for the ToLiss, but I must say I really like this one. Their second livery, I think it's the best one. And like I say, this one wasn't around for too long, and it became First Choice's livery, which is a little simpler. It didn't have all the fancy patterns down the side. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I'm Dimitri. It looks like this plane and livery should be going to Ibiza. Yeah, absolutely. It probably would be. I don't know, but I don't think Air 2000 ever flew to Gibraltar. But they certainly could have done it. They were chartered, but they had 321s, I think, and 757s, so probably a little bit big. They started loading up their 757s to fly across the Atlantic and do longer flights. So that's where they ended up spending their time doing that. DG27, excellent to see you. Another regular viewer for a long time now, since the channel was starting out. So thanks for coming along. Great to see you. Matteo, thanks for joining in. Enjoy your barbecue. It's good to see you here. I'm running way behind as usual. I hope you're having a good time out in the sun. Captain Peterkin, thanks for joining us. Corrosive Moon. That's very kind of you. Thank you for Corrosive Moon. Thanks for joining us today and for subscribing. Sorry for missing Matteo. I'll have to I'll speak to him another time. Scenery. Sorry to MLHNDLR Post Office. I'm not sure what that stands for, but sadly, scenery you're going to see today is very basic. This is all default X-plane. I have tried. I've put in a few, sadly, a fair few hours trying to get some freeware scenery for Gibraltar up and running. Richard V very kindly put it into the Discord. So if any of you are looking to chat about X-plane or see what goes on a bit more on this channel, so our checklist that we use and that sort of thing, we have our Discord, and in there they've been talking about freeware scenery for Gibraltar. I have installed the libraries. I've tried all sorts of things. I just couldn't quite get it to work in time reliably. I think I'm missing some more scenery libraries. So that's a work in progress. So sorry, Richard, you're going to see the default one today, but I will work at getting it for future videos a bit better. Now this I really like, this these scattered cirrus clouds and cumulus clouds. That's a really nice view. Got a bit of reflections on the water as well. So yeah, we seem to be doing all right. This is running on Vulcan. We're using Vulcan today, so hopefully it lasts us the flight. As I've said before, we have had big crashes in terms of the flight simulator crashing mid-flight. If it does, ToLiss should save and we'll get back in the air very quickly to where we want to be. But yeah, off we go. Yeah, I like the sound of these CFMs. Richard V, thank you. Yes, I may have to take you up on that offer. Okay, so some things that we were going to talk about. I should have written it down. I know I had something in my head that I needed to discuss earlier, but that's gone. So CFM engines, that's what we're using today. So what's the difference of the CFM? Well, performance-wise, I don't think there's much difference. There's no reason that a CFM aircraft could get into an airport or use more weight than an IAE engine that I'm aware of. So I don't think they're chosen for those reasons typically. The CFM is a very popular engine, and it's also what they use on the 737, so it's very well known. Although the 737 engine is slightly shorter fan blades because they couldn't make it fit. Or that may just be the Neo, but either way, yeah, it's uses the CFM, whereas we obviously have the IAE, which is what I traditionally use on this channel. And the more eagle-eyed of you will have noticed my thumbnail for this video, a little bit misleading, has the IAE engines, but I've since found out that Air 2000 just had CFM, so that's what I've gone for, just to be a little bit realistic and something different for the streams. We don't normally get to do this. What's the difference? Well, as a pilot, very little. As you can see, now we have N1, and that's our top mode of control. If it was IAE, this would say EPR, engine pressure ratio. EPR is used mainly by Rolls-Royce, and Rolls-Royce were involved with the making of the IAE engine. The IAE is a group of companies that made those engines, or make those engines. So they like to use EPR, whereas CFM uses more traditional N1, and that's why the 737 as well just uses N1, because there was only one choice, I believe, on the 737. I think N1 is the way I like to fly. Personal preference. EPR is very twitchy. It changes a lot. It can also be affected by turbulence, and you'll see EPRs go negative. I say negative, they'll go below 1 in flight, because if you're descending and there's your engines are at idle, then the pressure in front of the engine starts to build up and you get a bit of drag from the engines, so you get that weird numbers, and it's not quite as intuitive. N1, this is how a percentage of how fast the engine is spinning, that fan blade at the front. And 1 obviously means the front fan, and then 2 is the next fan behind it, and so on. So yeah, so it's it's quite simple like that. And as you saw for takeoff and so on, the magic of N1 being displayed like this is that I can simply move the thrust levers. So if I take out the auto thrust, I should move these to match where I was, and then I can press that. The ToLiss doesn't seem to quite have this as I would expect it to be, but there we go. Auto thrust off. Yeah, thrust levers move. Yeah, that's not quite. Normally, what you would do is you'd match the blue donuts to the line, and the engines wouldn't move until you then disconnected the auto thrust with the red button. But for some reason, the ToLiss seems to immediately move the thrusts, which is a little bit unrealistic. And then you end up here. And now I can just set it. Now, there's no big deal to that in flight. I just set the power I need. I know it's going to be somewhere in the 80% in the cruise up here. But on final approach, I could just set it to 55, which I'd expect to be when I'm fully configured, and that should work for us. So I suppose that could help. Mainly, you end up just setting the power you need, but I think that's a little bit neater. Right, let's put that auto thrust back on before we lose too much energy. Clear out that ECAM, and there we go. So in the IAE engines, we have N1, we have a third row, and pilots of IAE will end up looking at that one more than they'll look at the top one, but we don't get the blue donuts, so it's a little bit frustrating. There's also some missing buttons in this flight deck, as it's a CFM aeroplane. Up here, we have engine manual starts. If you look at my previous stream, at the start of that, I did a manual engine start, which I took us through, and the ToLiss did a great job, simulated it really well. Next to those, it has the N1 mode, and you can turn it on. Now, this airplane already runs in N1 mode, so they don't exist. But in the IAE engines, there's two buttons here, and if you turn those on, you'll override EPR, and you'll start running the engines in N1 mode. So that could be used if there's an electrical failure or something like that. That means the airplane can no longer work out the EPR, and it goes to probably a slightly less sophisticated way of calculating what the thrust from the engine. Oh, we've got some traffic getting pretty close. We did have a TCAS recently. No, there we go, 3,000 below. That's fine. So once you do that, then the blue dot, and I'll show you in another stream when we use IAE again, that blue dot would then go onto the N1 display down there, and you can use it. But that would be an abnormal situation. You can't do that just for the fun of it. Oh, let's see if we can catch that traffic going underneath us. There they go. And Iberia heading the other way. I'm not sure what you guys think as well. Lots of personal opinions about which engine looks better. I must admit, I change my mind all the time. In this livery today, I think these CFMs look really nice, quite proportioned for the 321. But I think the IAEs look quite sleek on a 320, make it look a bit sportier perhaps. But I don't know, probably doesn't matter at all. It's just one of those things that you think about. A couple of differences in landing as well, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Grace the Moon asks, if you don't mind, could you try and do a VFR circuit with the Airbus, a left hand or right hand, and post it to your channel? Yeah, so that's a great question, Grace the Moon. It's come up a few times, the request for circuits and touch and goes. So it's something I'm working on. It's on the list. I'm sorry I haven't had as many videos out lately. Although we're not flying so much at the moment, obviously any airline pilots in Europe, things are changing. There are some flights that go, but also training still goes on. So there's still training in simulators. So it's sometimes I have a bit busier periods and sometimes a bit quieter. So I'm hoping to get a video out on circuits and touch and goes, which will be good fun. And it's something that real airline pilots will only do once in their career, just on their first base training. When you're a cadet, you have to go and fly your new airliner, and it gets to the point where you finish a type rating, you're signed off, you've got your license, you've got a license skills test completed, so you've shown to an examiner that you can fly the airplane on instruments to the standard that they would expect, along with being able to handle the failures and so on. And there's all sorts of criteria and things you do. But once you've done that, you have to go and demonstrate you can land it. And for your very first airliner, you have to do that in the real machine, so which is just brilliant fun. It's something that most people never forget, where you'll take an empty airliner with a few pilots on it, and you will then go to a quieter airport and just fly circuits and touch and goes, and you'll do a landing and a takeoff and a landing and a takeoff and a landing and a takeoff. So I'm hoping to have a video to show you how to do that in your home simulator, because it's good fun, lots of approaches. We all like landing, don't we? And you get lots of practice of that. And there's some big points that need to be done properly to make it work in the Airbus. Post office. I used to be a mail handler at the post office, hence the shorthand name. There we go. It's explained. Thanks very much for that. I was always curious about that name. Excellent. Pavel, thanks for joining us. Hello. No problem being late. It's very kind of you to come along on a Sunday afternoon. Thomas Mortimer, do you follow other pilots on YouTube like Captain Joe or Mentor Pilot? Yeah, those are some big names, very big names. So yeah, obviously I see these guys on YouTube. Captain Joe has been around, and I think he now flies the 747, but he used to fly the Airbus. And I think Mentor is 737 pilot for Ryanair. I think he's talked about recruitment with them in the past. So yeah, so I've seen them on YouTube. Yeah, big names in the aviation YouTube community. Absolutely. Thomas Mortimer, spot on. I was going to mention that one actually. Absolutely, there is a great documentary. I'm not sure where you can see it right now. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Just have to have a little bit of water. Yeah, there's a documentary series in the UK that followed EasyJet pilots as they started out, and that included showing them doing their circuits training. So you have a load of cadets in the back, you have the training captain in the left-hand seat, you have a brand new first officer in the right-hand seat, and they just do their landings and takeoffs. No passengers, obviously. It's not a commercial flight. But yeah, and you just do your circuits at an airport. And it's very tiring when you're first doing it. To do 6 landings in a row in a brand new airliner, and you're obviously working very hard to keep up with the airplane. These are fast machines. Lots goes on very quickly, so it's good fun. There'll also be a safety pilot usually sitting on the 3rd seat in the flight deck, and there'll be another experienced pilot, and they'll be able to help the training captain in the left-hand seat to make sure that nothing goes awry whilst you're doing it. Yeah, absolutely brilliant fun. Thanks, Gracie Moon. Absolutely, yeah. EasyJet behind the cockpit. There you go from Thomas Mortimer. But yes, it may not be approved if it's on YouTube. I don't know how it's accessible in other parts of the world, or even in the UK. But so I'm not endorsing anything. But yeah, it may be available. Certainly that clip, maybe as well. Corrosive Moon says that they do know how to fly a circuit, but have some mistakes. It'll be good to see from a real pilot. Switch to track FBA, activate approach once you reach S speed, I suppose. Yeah, there's a few of the key bits. Absolutely. And the big parts about circuits is going to be how do we keep ourselves within the right area for the approach? How do we know when to start our descent? Because it can be a little bit hard to judge. We have no... Well, you don't have to do it with an ILS, so you could find yourself just doing final approaches with no vertical guidance whatsoever, just maybe you and the runway. You may have the PAPIs, you may not. You can do a visual approach 3 degrees by looking out the window, and that's a skill that is quite good to develop if you can. So I'm going to see if it's possible to go and set that up like that. Yeah, it'd be good. Right, how are we doing? Cruising along. I don't know what the interior of the cabin looks like, actually. Let's have a quick... I can't imagine there's anything special. No, it looks like the default ToLiss. And this is probably about as busy as the cabin would look given the situation with the passenger loads, because there are hundreds and hundreds of seats in here. You can have, I think Wizz Air have 230 passengers on their current generation 321, so the CEO. The Neos, you may have noticed, don't have these big doors. So when this airplane was designed, you had to have these full-size exits because of the number of seats. But the Neos, they've managed to change it. So you've got, I think, I'm not sure which door it is now. I think you have just the 2 doors here, but one full size and one smaller, something like that. So you can actually fit in more seats because where there is a big escape door, like here, if we go up, you'll be able to see, and any of you who've been on 321 will know this. There's a seat missing here. There's a big legroom here. So by having these full-size doors, and they also have to have a cabin crew sat here, I think, certainly on this row. It just takes up a lot of room, and they can fit more seats in without them. So they've managed to find a way to do it. Yeah, it's amazing. David Doyle, thanks for coming along. thanks for joining us today. I'm glad you've been enjoying the videos. Very kind of you for your kind words. So yeah, thanks for watching. So here we go, starting to arrive our high terrain area of the flight. Where are we routing over? Some of my Spanish followers will know these. Oh, Granada, there we go, I know that one. There's Malaga, I know that one. And obviously Gibraltar, down there, tiny little rock. Marbella, Cadiz, Puerto Real, which is, yeah, there's Lisbon. Yeah, so I'm not sure where we're going to go next after this. Possibly we could head out to the Canaries down here, the Palmas, or we could go somewhere in North Africa. So yeah, there's a whole world of options to start exploring our route with. Okay, so let's have a quick think about what we're doing today with our Gibraltar. Certainly, if you were flying to Gibraltar in real life, you'd put a bit more time and consideration into the planning of the flight. And we've already done that a little bit. We thought carefully about our fuel decision. We're taking a bit extra, but not too much. We're being mostly careful with our weight. As you can see, we are very light. We're already 58 tons. That's just great. Arriving with 3.8 tons, so that's, well, they expect us to burn about a ton from here. So we've probably got a descent point coming up in the not too distant future. Yeah, there it is, 120 miles. So yeah, probably time to start getting ready. So let's load up our charts for Gibraltar. Get rid of that, get rid of that. LXGB. Now Gibraltar is a military base, but it does obviously take civil aircraft. Let's load in the weather. So it's, yeah, so westerly 15. So what we're going to do is fly our approach in onto runway 27. Obviously, there is no way we'd get away in Gibraltar of arriving at with any sort of tailwind. It's just not going to happen. Let's just see if there's any air traffic control there, because I might consider fiddling with the weather, and we could do the 09 approach. Let's see. There's ATC though. We'll use that, but Malaga's got some arrivals. Gibraltar, no, looks pretty quiet. Okay. So, well, basically, there's two approaches into Gibraltar. Let's show you guys them. Here's the airport. Tiny runway, 1777 meters, and the landing distance is less. It's something like 1,500 meters, just over. The reason that it's shorter is because obviously that includes the entire length of tarmac, but we don't have access to this part here or this part here when we're landing. When we're rolling out, so if I land on 27, I can't use that because I land, this is the threshold, I land somewhere here, but I can use up to here. That's all stop distance available to me. And likewise on 09. I think what we'll do, I think that seems not really going to be too crucial for us today. I think what we'll do is we're going to just change that weather and give ourselves the approach onto 09. What do you guys think? If we do it onto 09, that's going to give us the flight around the rock, because if we look on the arrivals, approach, RNAV 09, this is great fun. You come down here, out, and then we scoot around into the bay and then land on final approach there. Alternatively, 27 for civil use, it says there. It's pretty much a straight in onto 27. So it still has the rock and the short runway, so there's the fun there, but it slightly misses out, I think, on the fun of coming around into this bay. So what I'm going to hope doesn't happen is we don't have any crashes. So let's disconnect. And I do apologise to anybody who was offended by my behaviour with VATSIM. Hopefully I don't have... This is allowed, but seeing as there's no ATC around, we're going to disconnect and just minimize that. And now, here's a good question, guys. How am I going to change the weather in... let's just make it manually configured. Swap it round. Let's make it 090. Oh, we can put it a little bit from the right, 110. And then the upper wind's, yeah, a bit different. That's absolutely fine. Okay, hopefully that wind stays valid as the flight carries on. Yeah, I'm getting agreement for 09, I'm glad. That's what I was hoping. So, let me just take into account that weather now. So let me just write it down. So what have we got? We've got a QNH of 1020. So nice high pressure day. Surface wind of 109 at 8. And the temperature of 25. So yeah, warm day in Gibraltar. Excellent. Cloud base not an issue, and we're just going to up the wave height a bit, because for this Lua script that will make it look a bit more satisfying. And apply. Okay, lovely. Glad you guys agree. David's flying a flight to Memphis in the 321. Excellent. Yeah, enjoy it. I'm a big fan of this 321 and this ToLiss product. I really like it. Raven Noodles, that's very kind of you. Thanks for coming along and watching and your support. Thomas Mortimer asks, what's the cabin flex Airbus offers? I think that can affect the seats. Yeah, so that involves, my understanding of that is that it's involves changing things like being able to put jump seats onto toilet doors and so on. But I'll talk about that in another video. Yeah, it's quite interesting how they managed to get in the extra seats. Right, so 09, let's change it all around. I was hoping you guys would say that. Oh, plan. So first of all, in our planning, we'd have carefully looked at the weather to make sure we fit. Now, your airline won't plan a flight, so they won't issue a flight plan, which today is this. This shouldn't get issued unless you fit. But if there's a tailwind or a wet runway or anything like that, you need to actually check that you fit. So before you've even left the briefing room, you're probably going to have done some sort of check, and it depends on your airline how that's done. But you'll do some sort of check to make sure that your airplane can fit into where you're going. And there's loads of different ways of doing that. So we know we have, because I've already done that for us earlier. RNAV 09. There's no star available in Gibraltar, but there is an Avaya via PIMOS. And if we go to airports, we can see, we go to that. The PIMOS is actually this point way out here. So if we zoom out, we're going to see that a bit clearer. Oh, even further. Back to our temporary flight plan and insert. And as we scroll through, we're going to go PIMOS out and then fly around in that bay. So there's our first part. So that's all checked. How's the go around? Climb to 4,000 feet. Follow the final approach track to runway 09 and then head to GBM 02. So there we go. Straight ahead, GBM 02, which is in there. Kukos and PIMOS. Well, those are just, I know that those points are arrivals. There you go, Kukos and PIMOS is where we start. So back out there at PIMOS, right turn, maximum 230 knots. That's fine. We can do that clean. To up, and enter the holding at 4,000 feet. So 4,000 feet is our go around altitude. We know that. That's good. We'll keep that in mind for later. RadNavs. So what sort of approach are we doing here? Well, it's an RNP RNAV approach to 09. So we're not using a VOR or anything. There is the Gibraltar VOR, which is a DME VOR, but it doesn't really give us much reference. If we look down here, distance to runway 09, and that's what's more important in the Airbus, that it's a distance to the threshold because we're doing an RNAV. If we were doing the VOR, obviously I would tune that, but I'm not going to use it today. And you can see as well, it says TAC 83. It's the TACAN, which would be a military thing, not something we use in civil aviation. Maybe in America they do. I'm not sure if any of you know more about it. Okay, so I'm not going to tune anything here. I don't need it. And certainly, if I lose GPS, I can't fly this approach. I've got to bin it. Progress page. Well, here we go. LXGB 09, and in it goes. So important to note, although that's going to give me distance to the threshold, when I'm here, it won't give me the track miles to the threshold. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with that, because that's usually a straight line in for our RNAVs that I've done in the past. So it's not quite as simple as it normally would be. Performance page. Let's load that in. So we're just following that little top hat. So flight plan, RadNav, progress, perf, fuel, secondary. So approach, QNH. We've already agreed 1020. Nice and high. Lovely day there. Temperature 25 degrees. Wind 109 at 8. So that's not bad, really. That wind is, I set it, but it's really much down the runway. So that's a nice sort of day, I would imagine, in Gibraltar, because you've got this big rock here, the Rock of Gibraltar, which we're going to be going behind. And you'll see on approach how close that is. And I'll talk about some of the effects that gives us later. Obviously, we're landing config full, which gives us a VAP of 130. So that's absolutely fine. We're light on purpose to make us fit in. Config 3 just wouldn't fit. Minima. Now here's an interesting one. RNP 0.12. So this is not just an RNAV approach. This is an RNAV authorization required, written there in big bold writing, because RF radial to fix is required. So what does that mean? Well, for special RNP approaches, they're called RNP AR approaches. You need to have special training to do it, and airlines need special approval to do it, and not all airlines have that. So I'm going to be really honest with you guys. I have not done an RNPAR approach into Gibraltar. So this is a learning experience for me and for you guys. We'll see what happens. But there's differences. The main difference being this approach involves turns whilst we're descending on final approach, whilst following an RNAV track. So you can see here, 3 degrees, RT arc, and all of this sort of stuff. The result of that is we have to be very careful with how we monitor it. We have to have backups. We have to know how to go around, because what if we're turning in cloud and we go around and there's a rock here? We must not go to it. So we have to have ways out of it and so on. So if there's any real Gibraltar pilots in the chat, then you can tell me what I'm doing wrong if we see it, or if you're watching this later, you can comment, because I'll be interested to know. But essentially, that's the big difference. It's turning on final approach. So if you look here, the minima is remarkably low, 374 feet. So I've got no radio nav aids, no ILS. Just see how we're doing on our approach. Still doing fine. Descending, yeah, about 60 miles. Good. No nav aids, no ILS, no VOR, and we're going to descend in the cloud potentially down to 374 feet over the water. And that point is at GB096. GB096, at which point we'll go around, and it's about 1 mile from the runway. So yeah, 300 feet, 1 mile, that's about right on a 3-degree approach, because it's about 300 feet for every mile. So we could get down to here in cloud and then go around. So that's a really useful approach, but obviously it takes extra training and money to be approved to do it. But it means you could probably get into Gibraltar if there was low cloud. Otherwise, if you weren't authorized to do that, there's all sorts of approaches, but they're pretty reliant on good weather. So visual approach, for example, you've got these different points and radials and so on, all of which you'll need to be very visual with the rock and the runway, the whole approach. There's also an SRA, not military. An SRA is a surveillance radar approach where air traffic control give you vectors. So they would just guide you down, tell you which heading to fly, and what altitude you should be at, and you try and maintain that. So they'll tell you to begin your descent now at 3 degrees, turn on this heading, turn left 5 degrees, turn right 5 degrees, and they'll do that until they'll say, right, the airport should be visual, and if you're not visual, you'll go around. So this is another sort of approach, which, if we look at the minimum for an SRA, it's basically 1,000 feet. So it's much better to have that RNAV if you can, because it just lets you get in on a wider range of conditions. Yeah, so it'd be interesting today. There is a problem with the ToLiss, I'm afraid to say, for doing this approach. So let's put in our minima. Our minima will be 374. And this is why I'm saying that this is very much not for any real-world use if anyone is looking at flying to Gibraltar. This is purely my best guess at times today. But yeah, 374 feet and the MDA we're going to put in. Now, the real Airbus can fly in RNAV mode, so we're going to use Final App to fly our final approach, which is simply where we still use the approach button, but we don't have LS selected because we're flying an RNAV approach, as it says there, RNAV. Now that mode can be used down to 250 feet in certain conditions, 250 feet above the runway. So that would mean that you could use your autopilot in Final App, so with vertical and lateral guidance, and it will fly you all the way down to 370 feet. Shortly after that, you'll need to disconnect and land. Unfortunately, the ToLiss is a bit like an older Airbus, and the older Airbuses, or the ones that have not been updated, so it just means that the software is not up to date. And I'm sure there's Airbuses out there like this. They will actually not let you do that, so it'll probably disconnect, and I know it does because I've tried this. It disconnects around 400 feet, at which point both the flight directors revert to heading vertical speed, and it becomes useless. So then you have to turn them off and turn on the bird. We never fly whilst ignoring the flight directors on the Airbus, never. And that came up as a question in one of the chats, or one of the comments on a previous video. But yeah, we do not fly by ignoring them. There's only one situation where you do that. It's an emergency situation, but essentially, and it's only on certain Airbuses, but essentially the reason is we want to be in the right speed mode. So if we ignore the flight directors, we could be in the wrong speed mode and we could get low speed or high speed events and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to let it come around the turn, and at some point take out the autopilot, turn off the flight directors, put the bird on and land. But it happens quite late on in the approach, so it's a little bit distracting, which is, again, another reason why you'd have a higher equipped aeroplane to fly this RNP authorization required approach. But today, we'll just make the best of what we can. And that'll bring us round onto final, and then we'll land hopefully flat full. Now, obviously, medium water brake and maximum reverse, absolutely. We are going to want to get it down and in. Also, the touchdown zone. I do not want to miss the touchdown zone markers. I think the real Gibraltar has several touchdown zone markers, but the X-Plane one seems to just have one. So my plan is to touch down as close to that one as possible. And if we float past it too much, we will just go around. Nice and simple, straight ahead go around, as we saw. Straight ahead, avoid the rock, obviously. Now, the weather today is good, so we're expecting to see the rock the whole time. But if we were flying this in IMC, and we went around from here because we lost navigational accuracy whilst we were turning, you'd need to have a way out because you do not want to turn and get too close to that rock or you'll get a GPWS very quickly off it. So that's why the visual requirements are so high on all the other approaches. Yeah, absolutely. Also descent planning, and this is where somebody else will know more than me. There's no platform altitude shown. So GB092 RT arc to GB09F, which is the FAP. And then 3 degrees from there, following that arc again to 096. So the only thing I found to check is GB09F mandatory 1500 feet. And if we go through here, GB09F 1500 feet and VAP. So I'm going to be gear down, flat full, 1500 feet at 09F, at which point I will make sure I arm the approach and let the airplane continue on the final approach here using final lap. That's the plan. But like I said, this airplane I don't think in real life would be certified to do an RNP AR approach. Jordy, yeah, I'm glad that was useful. Sorry if I've talked too much about RNPs. That's always the way. Yeah, there is, Ian Morris is quite right. There's an RNAV tutorial. So that is different to this. That is an RNAV tutorial. And then this is an RNAV or RNP AR. So slight differences. But yeah, the RNAV tutorial is your standard RNAV approach where you don't have these curves on final approach because they take a lot of extra work. It's like a lot of things in aviation. It's funny, really. You can do the whole flight and nothing really changes depending on the certification, but the last few seconds of the flight can involve huge amounts of money and training and expense to get it right and have it all certified because they just become so critical. It's the same thing on low visibility approaches. To get the RVRs to reduce... okay, I shouldn't talk about RVRs and so on yet. We haven't done a low vis tutorial. Something to come in the future. But basically, if the visibility is bad, a lot of airplanes can land with minimal extra equipment or training. But if it goes down the last few meters to get your required visibility down, the last 100 or so meters can take a whole host of extra equipment. It's amazing. Sometimes as much as to get the last 25 meters of visibility down. So that could make the difference of being able to land or not. You need to have a whole host of extra training and equipment available to you. Yeah. Ian Morris, in the real jet, does the GPS estimate nav accuracy ever go higher than 0.05? It seems stuck at that figure in the sim. So to see that, you go to the progress page, and we're going to check this in the descent today. It's going to be very important that we do, because we want to make sure that the airplane has GPS available. Because we're going to fly an RNAV, I need the GPS to be working. To do this, and I think that'll probably be written on here. Usually it is. Maybe not. RMP less than 1 to GBM02. Yeah, okay. Anyway, mine says 0.08. Required is 1 in this area. So it varies in real life. This number goes up and down. And if you have a failure of one of your IRs up here, one of the alignments might start to go wrong, or one may be a bit older and it might not be as accurate, then you'll start to see this go up. So it can go up and down. Yeah, absolutely. It's very rare to see it go below the required accuracy, and certainly you can still, if it does drift too far, you'll get a disagree between the different sides and so on, and you'll have a checklist and procedure to get it out. But yeah, navigation accuracy becomes hugely important. It's a great point on these non-precision approaches. Michael B, have you flown the approach into Funchal? No, we haven't done that yet, so that could be a good idea for the future. That could be a good way to carry on from Gibraltar, actually. Ryan Videos, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Pavel, can the pilot decide what altitude above the runway should he manage to be in the touchdown zone? Or this altitude is fixed 50 feet? So a normal landing over the threshold should be 50 feet. Yeah, we don't change that. It's not up to us. The criteria are set out by the certifiers, the authorities, the way the airplane's designed, the way the radio altimeters are designed. So unless there is very specific reasons, and that will probably involve extra training, and I don't know of anywhere where this happens, but it could be out there. That's not to say it doesn't happen. But no, we don't change that. We aim to be on a standard approach 50 feet over the threshold. I suppose London City would be the classic. It's a steeper approach. So anywhere with a different angle, you could change it. But what we couldn't do, because we're going to Gibraltar, we cannot just decide to be lower over the threshold. I might choose to not be, you might say, well, I definitely don't want to be high. So if we keep it at 3 reds, something reasonable, then that could be okay. And there's no real way to perfectly judge 50 feet. I know the radio altimeter will say 50 feet, but you don't get much warning. So you can't necessarily get it perfect, but we don't try and do anything too clever and get it too low over the threshold. But you might say, yeah, we don't want to be high. So I think today, for example, I would make sure we don't have 3 whites, for example, on final approach. And if we do, we'll make sure we try and get that corrected to give us a better chance. So yeah, great question actually. Yeah, really interesting. I guess the reality is that 50 feet probably changes depending on the conditions on the day. And it could be a bit lower, could be a bit higher. And then you have to adjust your flare accordingly. Potato, hello. Thanks for joining us. Right, how are we doing? Let's have another look outside, enjoy this livery for a bit. Probably not going to get to use it for a little while. Cruising along. Great scenery, lovely weather today. Nice and clear skies for once. My previous streams have been stuck in the grey. Well, I think it's probably time we start getting our descent in. So let's put that to constraints. Let's wind down. Let's head down to 90. And we'll have thrust idle, open descent, 90 is in. Right. What else do I want to talk to you about? So this is my uncertainty here, is what altitude can we be? Because 1,500 feet there is the only guidance I've got. Now the coding in here has some pretty reasonable guesses. So PIMOS, flight level 82, Bugov 2870, and then down to 1,500 feet. So I'm going to try and just follow the profile in the box in the MCDU. I also noticed that PIMOS and it's flight level 90 unless ATC obtained for lower, maximum 240. So we'll obey that. Also, we're going to be very visual. So magically today, I can just look outside and take the visual picture, and we can decide if we're safe down to 1,500 feet. But yeah, how they would plan that normally, I'm not entirely sure. You'll see minimum temperature 0 degrees Celsius. Well, now why is that? Well, as we know, in non-precision approaches like this, the vertical profile is based on our QNH. And if the QNH is wrong, your vertical profile will be wrong. So you might think you're at the right altitude, but you could be higher or lower. So really important that QNH is right. The temperature also has an effect on your real altitude. The colder it is, the denser the air is, and the closer together these different millibars of pressure will be. So when it's really cold, you'll actually be lower than you should be. So these tolerances are built into these approaches. But for non-precision approaches, they will give you a minimum temperature to which this approach is usable using vertical guidance. If the temperature is too cold, you may have to use a different form of guidance and adjust the altitude checks yourself. So you'll add on a new number. So if it was minus 20 degrees where you're flying to, I don't think it would work on this approach, but on a normal RNAV, you would then have to start adding altitudes on, or whatever the threshold is. There'll be a different number written here. And again, your airline will have a way of calculating that. It depends on procedures. It could be a calculator, it could be a chart, it could just be you have to calculate it yourself. So yeah, so that's why we have minimum temperatures for RNAV approaches. Quite important to pay attention to. And down we go. Another unique thing about Gibraltar, as you probably guess, if we look here, wind effects, and this is great. Look at that. So strong easterly wind blows over the rock and the hangars, and you get all these vortexes. Now these arrows, I don't know why they're drawn so accurately. I can't imagine that matters much, because effectively you're going to get lots of turbulence as you come off these hills, probably with this sort of wind actually. and here's a southerly wind, gives you turbulence all over the actual runway. So your approach might be nice and smooth coming in on, for example, on 27, and then you'll just enter turbulence as you're trying to land. Likewise, wind this direction. So there's all sorts of different limits that airlines may try to put in place. They may say if the wind is above a certain amount, do not try and make an approach. Something a bit different there. That would be airline specific. Yeah. Winds in excess of the speeds are quoted are likely to cause turbulence or wind shear on final approach. So there you go. So yeah, it's quite unique to have such high terrain right next to the runway, and obviously that's going to cause issues for turbulence. So I'm going to check. Our predicted wind shear is on. Now, predictive wind shear doesn't work by looking at actual wind. It works by looking at the water in the wind. So if this was really windy, but there was no rain around, it could be that your predictive wind shear just doesn't really activate very, very well. Predictive wind shear uses the radar to look ahead into the rain and water, and it can sense different movements of air, and it can warn you that there's wind shear ahead, and it will say something like that. Reactive wind shear we can't turn off. It's not fitted as a separate option. It's just on, and that is the airplane computers, and they can work out if there's been big shifts in the wind, whether it's an issue. And if you get that warning, you'll have to do an escape maneuver, the memory items for a wind shear, which gets you the energy in. Ryan Videos 94 just flew the Zebo for the first time in a month after flying the 321 ToLiss so much. Fancy to change. Wish I never changed now. Forgot half the things in the cockpit. Yes, I can imagine that it's quite a change between the two. Although they do compete with each other on the market, the 737 and the Airbus are really different airplanes. They're designed so far apart because the 737 NG, which is the Zebo mod, as my understanding anyway, that has got the overhead panel from 737-200, that they kept it the same to try and keep the type ratings similar. So it's really quite different and uses a lot of switches, whereas this is much more modern with just these individual buttons and so on. I'm not going to sit here and say one's better or one's worse. That's just a fact of the design. So this was designed from the ground up, whereas the 737 uses a sort of a legacy overhead panel. So I can imagine that's quite hard to keep on top of the systems. I'm sure the pilots who use it love it and they know it very well. The Airbus, we're just looking and we just have white lights and so on. It's all very, very simple. But we have our own differences. We have to be aware of the flight control modes and the way the computers are interacting with us and so on. Okay, here we go. Going down to the PIMOS. And Michael B. quite rightly said descend. Yeah, I was too busy looking at the outside. We got ourselves high. How high are we? 1,400 feet. If I go to manage descent, we get DES. And now it has more room to play with. It should accelerate and get us down. And in managed descent, I'd expect it to be able to do make up 1,400 feet high. No problem. Potato says, wish X-Plane 11 would add all the seasons. Snow would be nice. Yeah, I have only recently found out that X-Plane doesn't have seasons. I'm a long-term, I've used FSX for a lot of years, and I assumed X-Plane had it, but it turns out it doesn't. So that is a bit of a shame. It looks like the new Microsoft Flight Simulator will, but obviously I don't think we're going to have an Airbus product quite like this on the new Flight Simulator, certainly not at launch. It may take a bit of time. I'm also deeply concerned about the computer specs needed to run the new Flight Simulator. I think mine computer will struggle, but it does look stunning. The scenery especially looks absolutely amazing, and I know they're including a 320 Neo, which is great fun. But again, I'm not entirely sure how accurate it will be, especially when we have these sorts of ToLiss products out there. I think someone did ask actually, do I have the Flight Factor 320? But no, I don't. And at the moment I'm using Vulkan, so I wouldn't swap to it until I know that I can, because I need to use Vulkan to keep the frame rates in a good region for streaming, basically. Croson Moon, that's a reasonable question. What I would do is I might skip over that question, but thank you for asking. I just to sort of just keep keep a little bit of guessing, but all over Europe certainly in Airbuses. Yeah. Ryan Videos prefers the 321. Looks far better. Yeah, and I would be inclined to agree with you. I think the Airbus is a great piece of machinery. Really, really nice. Just nicely designed. It just all seems to work. It's a very comfortable place to sit as well. The flight deck is very comfy. Lots of space in it. I mean, if you look around in the flight deck, I know we don't do this much, descents coming in. You got all this space around us, got tray tables, and then behind us, there's room here. You've got more cubby holes here and storage. Third seat, which even has its own armrests, and there's a wardrobe here behind the captain and so on. So it's got lots of room in it. It does feel very nice to be in, and I think it's a bit quieter as well, from my understanding from talking to Boeing pilots. Potato, same. I don't know about GTX 1070 and FS 2020. Yeah, and I'm on the GTX 1060 mobile, so it just might not happen. There you go. Ian Morris has very kindly answered Liz O'Fire's question. Very absolutely. The arrival, the predictive wind shear on approach isn't always fitted, but certainly reactive wind shear is. I might have to do a video on those. I don't know if they work in the ToLiss. I'll be interested to see. Matteo Chewy, thanks for returning. Well, I hope I hope someone else is driving. So that you don't get distracted. But thanks for joining us. Sorry, I did see your name earlier, but yeah, I was running about 10 minutes behind in the comments section. Corrosive Moon, why don't you just upgrade to a desktop and just leave it at home? Yeah, that the reality is I'm using a computer that I bought a few years ago, and for streaming it may be that I need to do that. It's just a case of obviously given the current situation in the world and the flying industry, we'll see how things go as to whether we can swap it over. But for now, we seem to be doing all right with X-Plane and Vulcan. It's been pretty good. And here we go. We've got this nice water. I like this water effect heading out over the coast using the Lua script for that. So I must add that to the chatbot. Yeah, Thomas Mortimer, absolutely. The tray table is just great. It's a shame it's not modelled. I know the Aerosoft did it, and it would pop out. I think it even works in some of the mobile simulators, but that's just a bit of fun, really. This tray table, especially when you're dealing with abnormal situations, so you've got lots of numbers and calculations to work through for whatever situation you've ended up in. It really gives you space. You can have your quick reference handbook out, you can have it on the table, or your electronic flight bag, your iPad or whatever. You can fit these things onto the table and have access to more information. The risk of that is that you get distracted, so you must keep your eyes looking at the other things and monitoring what's going on, obviously. But it gives you a lot of breathing space, and you can actually write down. Whereas before, the tray table, so in other airliners, 737s and all sorts like that, you actually end up having to sort of balance things on your knees and so on. And of course, when everything's going well, being able to eat off a table makes a huge difference rather than balancing on your knees or getting food all over yourself. Yeah, really nice. Right, coming down, going to be nice and daylight for our approach. That's great. Another effect of Gibraltar is it's not uncommon with any sort of strong wind to see a cloud over the rock, because we've got an easterly wind here. It goes up, pushes up over the rock, and then that air is humid air that goes up and gets cooled down and condenses the water, and it condenses and you get a cloud. And that can make this approach a little bit tricky, because if you come around, turning around onto final, and you suddenly get a cloud and you go into cloud and then you're a bit stuck, you need to be able to see what you're doing. So that would be a reason that this approach is quite useful, this AR approach. Right, 240 knots by PIMOS, and it's already coming back to that. So we're nearly on profile, so that'll be fine. And PIMOS at 90. After that, I'm just going to put 1,500 feet in and let the airplane descend itself, because there's no air traffic control for us today and we're visual. And I don't see any problem with being 1,500 feet over the water. We can see RMP 0.3 there. So that is really accurate. It needs to be down at within 0.3. And at the moment, we're 0.08. So the airplane is very good. Yeah, there you go, 0.3. Ryan videos ahead on the news yesterday. It's going to take 4 to 5 years for airlines to go back to normal. Yeah, I don't think anybody knows for sure for now, because of there's so many different factors, and it's just such an unknown situation. So we shall see. But hopefully things recover at a reasonable rate. Okay, so there's the rock. We're visual with it now, which is great. That's a good sign that we'll be able to do this approach normally. After PIMOS, as I said, we're going to manage descent. We're going to use our procedure now. Actually, I'll leave that off just for this approach, just to make sure we don't get too distracted by it. Thank you all for sticking with us now. We've been going for, an hour and 24, so one of our longest sort of flights. I thought Gibraltar was closer to Barcelona, to be honest. There we go, through flight level 100. So let's get those landing lights on. Get the camera crew sat down. I don't want to have to be thinking about that later on. And crucially, GPS is primary, accuracy is high. It's estimating the accuracy as being 0.08, so that's great. And if I go into position monitor, you wouldn't do this in real life, but I can see that they're all pretty much aligned. But you can see here, and this is pretty realistic actually, they're all at different drifts from the main calculated point, which is quite normal. Yeah, if this number gets too high after a short flight, then you'd know that that one needs changing. Okay, speed out star 90. And what I'm going to do, just to make sure, is check the QNH is still set at 1020. Good. Right. So we said we had to be 90 at PIMOS unless air traffic said otherwise. But the airplane wants us lower, so we'll see. And 240 knots, which we're pretty much there at. I'm going to start down. Let's say that air traffic control let us descend. So 5,000 feet, 1020 QNH is set. And now we do not turn on the LS push button because we're doing an RNAV. And as I promised, I'm going to set this to 1500. And now hopefully the airplane gets us back onto that profile. And by Bugov, we should be on it. Now I know in this situation today, because I've tried this, the airplane won't let me arm final app, which will be this push button. It won't let me arm it until we're a bit closer in and we're at 1500 feet. So how realistic that is, I just don't know. I'm sorry guys, this approach is an unusual one because it's an RNP AR. So there we go. So my thumbnail was taken from sort of a base leg turn, if you guys are wondering. So we'll see how it works. There we go. Anti-ice, most select can stay at normal, barometer, and approach checklists. Good. How are we doing? Yeah, we're nearly on the profile. Speed is good. How many miles until landing now? 27 miles. We need 21 miles plus a little bit extra. So that is, about on profile. What I might do though is, just so we don't forget, let's activate the approach phase. And there we go. We get our lateral deviation and vertical deviation bars. Doesn't matter that it's low below us because that is obviously based on a different guide. So I'm not entirely sure what it's using for this one, to be honest with you. But what I'm going to do is go into docile, open descent. In fact, let's make it a VS. So speed, vertical speed. And let's see if we can get ourselves down onto the calculated profile. So, it's all going wrong here. Here we go. Right, GB092, 2730, Bugov, 3,000 feet. Okay. We're about 3,000 feet high, so 9 miles, so we need to do a 3-degree descent, but we've got a tailwind, so let's make sure we get down. Here we go. Sakisar, hi, thanks for joining us. Ian Morris, the cloud around Jib Summit is called Levante. There you go. Great knowledge. Thanks for that. Crows and Moon, quick question. On the 321 ToLiss, when putting in performance for the takeoff in ICS, it gives high V1 and BR. Is it accurate? For flap 1, I think it's okay. For flap 2 and 3, I think the speeds are too high. Unless you're using a short runway, then they seem more accurate. But yes, I would agree. They do work, I think, legally because of the, not legally, but performance-wise, it accounts for the V2 speed being raised, which is okay. That is a valid technique, but I think it does it too much, and I rarely see numbers that high in the real airplane. But for flap 1, I think it's a bit more realistic. Lizzo 5, it better be in the touchdown zone. Agreed. Yes, we shall see. What is the best alignment percentage for the A321, says Pavel? I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure what you mean with that. Marsden, should we turn off the GS button for this approach? No. Now, I know the ToLiss sometimes does need that, but we don't need to do that because, in fact, let's check our track miles. See, we're starting to get a bit close in, so I want to slow down now. I see I've got onto that profile, so let's wind that up and let the speed reduce. No, we don't need to disable GS mode because we haven't got an ILS tuned. If we go into RadNav, it's got 115, but there is no ILS here, so there's nothing for it to get confused with. In real life, you don't actually need to do that. If you're flying a non-persistent approach into an airport with an ILS, you don't normally have to disable the glide slope to stop it shouting at you. There are some occasions, but the ToLiss, for some reason, has in the past started making noises at me, and I've had to do that. Okay, let's get this slowed down a bit quicker. So get the speed brakes out. Flaps to 1. Because very important, I need to be at the 09F at 1500 feet. That is the mandatory bit. So let's get this height off. And to do that, I also want to be fully configured at that point. So let's keep it coming down. So there's the rock starting to come out there, getting low over the water. We'll have good fun on the replay. Hopefully the replay works. I know we've had trouble in the past. So we're getting below the profile now. I can start to reduce that rate of descent. And with the engines trying to target VAP, or currently S speed, we'll lose that speed quite quickly. So we've only got 1,000 feet to lose now, over 5 miles, so we can come right back on that vertical speed. Expecting the radio altimeter to come alive now, and that will confirm that our QNH is correct at 1020. Yep, there we go. Excellent. Let's go to flaps 2. Keep the speed coming back. Now this is where a little blue arrow to show me where I'm leveling off would be really useful, but for some reason it isn't there. Can I arm approach yet? I can. Nav. So I think in real life, if this magenta bug came past me now, it should intercept, but for some reason the ToLiss doesn't, and it could be because we're doing a RNP AR, so I don't know, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. And round we come. We'll have more views when we do the replay. Right, I've always forgotten the speed brake, so we're not doing that today. Oh, excuse me. And here we go. There's the rock. We've got our tailwind, 9 knots, so expecting a few lumps and bumps off this rock as we turn round in the bay. It's 2,000 feet. Absolutely fine. Let's reduce that rate of descent a bit more. I'm going to ding the cabin now. Things like that on a busy approach like this, you'd get out of the way nice and early so that you didn't have to think about it later. I've got my go-around altitude of 4,000 feet in and ready to go. Flaps 40, thanks for joining us. Good to see you again. And yeah, thanks for coming along on this Sunday afternoon for our little ditty into Gibraltar. Okay, 160 knots is a maximum limit at that point, as we can see it, max 160. So we're on profile, and I'm hoping shortly we will see ourselves intercept final lap. How long have we got until we touch down now? 7 miles around that turn. So very soon we're going to put out the rest of the gear and the flaps. As you can see, flap 2 F speed is really slow. It's quite close to your V approach anyway, so not too much of an issue. There we go. There's Gibraltar. Let's go. Gear down. Flaps to 3. Flaps to full. Arm. On. Please, please, please capture now. Like I say, I've had trouble with this. Come on. That start. Nope, it's not going to do it. Let me wind that down. Keep it coming. Final lap. There we go. Now that's not an illegal technique. That is just because I know this is not letting me do that. So 4,000 feet in, we've got final lap. We're fully configured at 1,400 feet. And now the airplane is going to fly us right round. As I said, we're going to get that slightly early disconnect of the autopilot. So I'm going to disconnect it at a suitable point. And at that point, flight director's off, bird on, and in we go. So, fantastic. There's the rock, turning around, getting around the buildings. There's 1,000 feet, stable. I hope this works. And we definitely start to feel a few bumps coming off this rock. And there's the runway coming into sight. Lots of buildings around it. Ah, speed caution, there we go. That'll be from a wind shift in X-plane, which is a little bit severe. What it's saying is the airplane's lost energy and you need to do something. And luckily the engines have reacted and got us back up. It happens in certain configurations, mainly on approach. It's possible to get that warning. Right, let's focus up on what we're doing then. Coming around the corner, Pappies are 3 whites. Yeah, not unreasonable because we're in a turn. A wind is from the right. Autopilot off. Flight director's off. Bird on. Thanks for the subscribe, whoever that was. And we'll set that track. Not too important now. And let's keep that 3 degrees coming on. So 900 feet per minute. 2 whites, 2 reds. Oh, too much. Let's get that under control. Wind from the right. And you see how easy it is to overreact. So we don't want 3 white, so let's keep that rate of descent on. Trying to target 3 degrees, somewhere similar. Keep it going down, 900 feet per minute. There we go, 2 whites, 2 reds. Keep it going down. Oh, drifting to the left. Get the reversers out. Oh, that's a bumpy runway. Max reverse, 70 knots, back to idle. And leaving the auto brake in. Let's see where we end up. Look at that. Forward idle on the engines now. So we've made it to the to the parking point. Now that was a bit of an interesting landing. As you saw, by not getting the drift off, we started to drift to the left. And also, there's a bit too much bumpiness on this runway, I think. There's a big bump shortly after touchdown. So let's get ourselves off the runway and get ourselves over and parked. Fantastic, yeah. Here's the Gibraltar terminals. Yes, this is the default scenery, and it's pretty good, actually. It's not too bad at all. Right, I think we're just going to go straight into here. If that tractor can move out of the way. He's going around pretty fast. Lots of spotters in Gibraltar usually, and they have to close a road that runs across it, so get those off and those off, get the APU up and running. Disarm to 0. Slow it down. Get that started. Those lights can go off. Get the radar off. Predictive wind shear off. And we'll get some... Well, I'll see how the brakes do. Excellent. I think that's pretty much it for the after landing flow. Yeah, so there's a road there, and they actually have to close it when airplanes are landing. So if you do land in Gibraltar, you'll see barriers come down and everybody's standing there waiting to watch you. Oh, let's slow it down. 321, probably one of the further forward ones, I'm guessing, but let's see. That'll do. APU's still not ready. Yeah, that's what happens if you don't have it done in time. Thomas More towards 1 feet per minute out. Oh dear, I imagine that was quite a quite a rough landing then on the scale. So let's have a look. Right, APU available. Parking brake is on, and we can shut down the engines. Passenger signs can go off. Wait for these M1s to get sort of below. I think 10% would be reasonable for a CFM. Fantastic. Right, let's go have a look at that landing and see how things went. But otherwise, welcome to Gibraltar. So out we go. So here we are coming around the rock. Wheels out, down we go. Stabilised early. This is a great function in X-Plane. I really like the replay functions. Thanks, SB. Thanks for joining us. David Doyle, yeah, hope you join the Discord and enjoy it. Thanks for coming along. Yeah, the landing rate competition, excellent. Oh, well, it must have been quite high then, if I was pretty close. But 370, I don't know. As you guys know, we just want to get it in the right place. So let's go. Let's go to external runway. Let's go and sit ourselves somewhere close to where the all the people watching get to see it from. So they'll all be up at this roadway crossing over here. yeah, so we were drifting too much. But you see this ridge. This is, I don't know if any other X-plane sceneries get rid of that, but it makes a difference. I've actually taken off on 09 and had the airplane get airborne off that ridge for a bit before settling back on the runway. But here we go. So we wanted to be in the touchdown zone. I think we made that. As I said, there's more markers in the real place. Let's have a look. Right. So yeah, lots of lumps and bumps. And I'll be curious to see what the passengers would have seen of it. There we go. Yeah, a little bit overcorrection. There's the drifts. Bit of a thump, bit of a bounce, but there we go. You don't want to be messing around. And there's that bump. Look at that. That is huge. That is impressive. Not my landing, that bump. Yeah, it actually put the aircraft back in the air. That was a bit of a bounce anyway, and then bang. Brilliant. Let's do one more from our passenger view. Just to see. Let's see. And there we go. So yeah, so definitely not one of our smoothest landings, but a bit of fun getting our 321 into Gibraltar. Thank you guys for coming along and watching it. It's been very kind to see you on this evening. And there we go, rolling out. And there was that bump putting us back in the air. Fantastic. Simon, David, thank you very much for coming along. Thomas as well. Great to see you guys here today. Richard V says you can disable those ridges in X-Plane. There we go, may need to do that. Flaps, 40, love the livery. Yeah, I think it's great. If you type in ! livery, you'll be able to see the download for it if you fancy it for your home. Ian Morris, great to see you. Thanks for coming along. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. And hopefully I'll see you guys in another stream soon. We'll carry on our little tour and let's see if we can get ourselves out of Gibraltar and to somewhere different. I'll also, if you have any liveries you'd like to see used, do let me know. I'll keep working my way through some ones I just find interesting. But thank you very much for indulging me for another day today. That's all for today, everybody. Thank you to all the new joiners. As I said, there'll be more videos to come, and we'll see you again in another live stream or tutorial video soon. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good evening.